My name is Wesley Bloome. I'm the owner of Wise Guys Pro Wash in Atlanta, Georgia. So my friend called me and we were on the phone in my college dorm room talking about what we were doing for the summer, and he said, we should do something together in addition to our other jobs, our summer jobs. And I said, sure. I said, what do you have in mind? He said, landscaping. And I said, that's not going to work because people aren't going to fire their landscaping service for a couple kids for 10 weeks, and then we go back to college. And so I thought of pressure washing. I don't know how I did. I had never done it, he'd never done it, but I thought it was a great idea. So we asked around and figured out that one of his aunts had a machine, and then that's kind of how we started. Didn't know how to turn the machine on at the first job, but his dad, we were able to call his dad, and he was able to walk us through that. Back then I didn't know about the different organizations and conventions and that sort of thing. I just watched YouTube videos, and there was one channel in particular, and I remember that he would always talk about the huge convention. And so I was like, at some point I'm going to go to this thing and see what this is all about. It was 2016, so I was 21. I just started my senior year of college, and it was the first time I'd ever traveled by myself. So I flew up there, first time flying by myself, first time renting a hotel room. Back then Uber wasn't even normal. It was kind of scary. So I remember on the first day I actually walked from the hotel to the convention center. It was 2.5 miles because I did not want to take an Uber. And so that was the first one that I went to. Didn't know a single person there. Really what happened was when I walked into the huge convention for the first time during my senior year, that was the moment when I made the decision to myself that this is what I wanted to do after college. For me, pressure washing was always just something to do to make some money, but it wasn't gonna be my career. And when I walked into the huge convention, and I was the youngest person there by 10 years, they were just normal people just like me. And so it kind of gave me that inspiration to know that if they can do it, then I can do it. Especially if I'm gonna be learning from them, it only makes it easier. I went to the convention. Everything was great. Got back home and was excited to implement some of the things that I learned. And one of the things that I was really trying to do back then was to get off the truck, because back then I was actually out. I was involved in the day-to-day, and that was the big thing. I just got to get off the truck. As it is for most people in the early days. The first day that my two employees went out to a job site without me, the whole day, didn't see them, to do a couple of jobs. And so everything went great. And so we were on the phone, and they were on their way back. They'd stopped at the storage unit to drop off the trailer, and it's only a mile from my house. And so they're on their way back to my house, which was the office. All of a sudden, I hear, it sounds like he drops the phone, the guy, the employee that I was talking to. And then it sounded like glass was breaking, and my phone died. And so it was kind of surreal. It didn't seem like it was real life. And so I went over and I plugged my phone in, and unfortunately, your phone doesn't power up right away. So you have those couple minutes of just silence. And I'm looking out the window and I see, an ambulance drive by and fire truck drive by, and all these cars are backed up because it's in front of the one road between the storage unit and my house. And the phone finally powers on, and my employee says the truck's totaled. And so I walk up there, and it's upside down, perpendicular to the road. And this was right after we sold a $25,000 job, which was $24,000 bigger than our biggest job before that. And so that was definitely one of those moments where, not only is the truck totaled, but all the equipment that was in the back is done. And that was the moment where it was do I just stop now? So that was one of the initial biggest, obstacle. There was plenty more after that. I got off the truck, and that was great, but it was kind of temporary because those employees were friends of mine that I went to college with. So they weren't complete strangers. I think it's easy in the beginning. You hire people that you know. And so the next step was that, was hiring strangers for the first time. And so I had a decision to make at that time, at the end of 2017, where I could have, at that point I was already 4 years into running the company, and I had, accumulated some money because I just saved and saved and saved. And so, at that point I probably had $100,000 saved up, and it was what do I do? Do I walk away now You know, do I go to grad school and have a life that I never did in college because I was working the whole time? You know, or do I invest it all in? And so, you know, that's when I decided to go all in. So I, you know, hired a designer to, you know, revamp our logo, and we changed the name of the company, and I got an office space and, you know, another vehicle, and, you know, I bought like $3,000 worth of uniforms, and I didn't have a single employee, so I had to buy like all the sizes, you know, from small to like triple XL. And so, you know, then I hired my first couple of strangers, you know, and that was kind of a new challenge. So I was out selling while they were out doing the work, you know, and then just kind of, you know, grew from there to where then the next step was hiring an admin. I was still selling. Then I eventually hired a salesperson, you know, all the while like adding crews and changing offices and into a bigger space, and, you know, and all that sort of things. Once I finally just let it happen and just trusted that was part of the process, things really came together. Everyone should go to the Huge that's in the industry. I think that for new people, it's very good because you don't know what you don't know, you know, and so it gives you, it helps you see, you know, what others have done and be able to meet them and talk to them. I think for experienced people, it's a way to continue to build relationships with those that you know, because we're all in this together. And so it's really like a reunion, you know, where you see the same people every year, and you can talk about the struggles and, you know, the wins and all that. And, you know, your friends back home don't do what you do, and so they can't fully relate. So, you know, that's one of the reasons. And then you get to a point where you are, you know, one of the more successful people there, or your company is one of the bigger companies there. And I feel like at that point you have an obligation to go back and give back, because it's kind of like you wouldn't be there without events like this. So I really think that whoever you are, whatever stage in business you are, there's a place for you at the Huge, and that you really should go and make the investment in yourself. And what I've told myself is that I'm going to continue to go until I don't feel like I'm getting my money's worth. And here we are 5 years later and still here. I think that you have to go in with a plan. You can't just show up. Right, so and that means you have to have a plan for two different ways, like two different types of plans. One plan is that what I did was I had a list of all these questions that I had, right? Technical questions, you know, how do you clean this? You know, what product do you need for this? You know, all the technical questions, I had all those listed out. And so when I would meet people, I would just ask them. You know, I would legitimately pull my phone out and I would say, hey, you know, how do you clean this? And then they would walk me through it, and I would kind of take notes. So that's the first step, is kind of what questions do you need answered at the convention, right? The second thing is that who do you need to meet at the convention? So you don't want to just show up and not know who the successful people are. And the good, you know, most of the speakers are those people. So that's a good kind of, if you really don't know, you want to kind of seek the speakers, not necessarily directly after they speak, but kind of in between, even before the session, kind of get their attention, because, you know, there's a reason why they're speaking. I mean, they've obviously done, you know, fairly well themselves. So I think that's the two biggest pieces of advice, is have questions going in and know who you want to meet. I mean, every year there was a couple people that I did not know that I wanted to know, and so I went out and sought, you know, and sought them out. I'll never forget, you know, Ryan Wilkins was one of the speakers, and I went to his class, and this was my second convention, and it was a really good class, and he was on the list of who I wanted to meet, and I chickened out after the class, and I was too nervous to go and speak to him. And the next day, I didn't see him once. So I was like, this guy's gone, I missed my chance, I can't believe that. And then I'll never forget, I was coming down the escalator, and I saw him walking through the lobby, yelled his name, and that was where it started. And now we're like friends. We talk all the time. So it was, yeah, definitely those are the two. You can't just show up and, you know, that's not what it's all about. You know, it's a tool. You have to use it like a tool.